All right, good evening, everybody. This is the Rules and Legislative Oversight Committee. We'll be hearing Bill number 22-0234, Police Accountability Board. We will first start off by passing the mic over to Chairman Conway, who is the bill sponsor. He will give us a quick overview of the bill, and then we will turn it over to the agencies who are here to present. After that, we will open it up to public testimony. Anybody from the public who'd like to speak, just please sign your name on the form in the back. When we get up to public testimony, we will pull that list and call you from that list. So if you sign in and just check off, indicate that you want to speak. Everybody who wants to speak and signs up will have an opportunity to speak. So without further ado, Councilman Conway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening to my colleagues and the members of the public joining us here tonight. So tonight is the first of 3 hearings on Bill 22-0234 to create the Baltimore City Police Accountability Board as mandated by the Maryland Police Accountability Act of 2021. While we are working to meet the deadline for that state bill, which is July 1st, I think we can all agree here that it is most important that we get the bill right. Chair Schleifer has agreed to provide the opportunity for public testimony at each of the 3 announced hearings, and I really want to thank Chair Schleifer for his flexibility and willingness to ensure that Baltimoreans have plenty of opportunity to weigh on this landmark legislation. So thank you, Chair Schleifer. Unfortunately, too often in our great city's history, real police accountability has been insufficient and in some cases non-existent. Complaints have gone unanswered. Cases have been dropped, and constituents have walked away wondering who's making sure that problematic officers follow the law. It is the hope of the state legislature, and certainly my hope here, to stand up strong mechanisms for accountability in Baltimore that can be both trusted by the community and that the community plays an active part in. This bill, which I introduced in consultation with the administration, provides for the composition, requirements to serve on, and the powers of the Police Accountability Board, which will replace the Civilian Review Board. And I want to make it clear from the beginning that I'm very open to strengthening amendments to this bill based on conversations that I've already begun having with advocates and my colleagues here, and especially based on testimony that we'll hear tonight and in the coming weeks. The objective of these hearings is not just to provide a patina of community engagement, but to provide a genuine opportunity for both everyday community members and advocates who have put in years of effort on this issue to voice their thoughts and put forward suggestions. With that, I'll wrap up and we can get right into agency reports. But once again, thank you, Mr. Chair, for being so flexible.
Thank you. Before we turn over to agency reports, I'll announce all the members of the council who are here. Councilman Burnett, Councilwoman Ramos, Councilman Torrance, Councilman Conway, Council Vice President Middleton, Nikki Thompson from the Council President's Office, and staff to the committee, Richard Kumreich. I will now start with the Office of Equity and Civil Rights. If you can come up to the mic and say what you'd like to say.
Thank you all so much. My name is Mariel Shutinya. I'm representing the Office of Equity and Civil Rights. I'm currently the supervisor for the Civilian Review Board, and I've been working on the police accountability structures for our office. We are in support of this bill with amendments as detailed in our written report that we provided. I just want to provide a slight overview of the practical implementation for this bill. Our office will be tasked with supporting the Police Accountability Board and the Administrative Charging Committee, supporting all staff members, intake for all complaints, which can take a lengthy amount of time, case management for the Administrative Charging Committee. We also need to do outreach, public education, have ombudsmen for our complainants, as well as provide policy and data analysis. This is all required under HB 670. As we support this bill, because it has those same foundations and it will help us do this, we have been reviewing all of this and the way to implement this in the best way using best practices, either from DOJ, other organizations, other civilian oversight, looking at the data from BPD, from our office, and looking at decades of criminal justice research and how having an effective oversight and effective oversight and effective implementation of these can really help with crime reduction, violence reduction, and increase procedural justice and trust in the police and our city agencies. I really just want to highlight two of our amendments that are kind of practical implications that we really need to be addressed. The first is the complaints. As of July 1st, 2022, we must begin intake of complaints. The law enforcement agencies are able to do that as well, but we are required to. As the bill stands without any amendments at this time, the PAB has to set up the procedure and process. We need an interim process for now before the PAB is fully set up so we can begin intake and forwarding to law enforcement agencies before the PAB members are established. We have the CRB, we already have intake process, but that's very important. And the second amendment that we really want to highlight is the complaint process in general. Under this bill, we are required to forward law enforcement or complaints against law enforcement to the agency so they can begin their internal investigations. It does not require the law enforcement agencies to provide us with copies of the complaints. We would like there be a back and forth with that, so we have all of that information for tracking purposes, data purposes, and so we can plan for the case management and what the ACC members will be reviewing. Otherwise, we defer to our written report, but we are in support of this bill with amendments, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? No. Okay, next up, Law Department.
Good evening, and thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. My name is Ebony Thompson. I'm Deputy City Solicitor. Pursuant to the authority provided under Chapter 59 of the Laws of Maryland, the Baltimore City Council has introduced City Council Bill 22-0234 to put into place the PAB and the ACC for Baltimore City. The Law Department has several concerns that are largely minor. The bill can be amended to remedy these problems. Provided that the amendments are incorporated into the bill, the Law Department can approve the bill for form and sufficiency. I would like to highlight, similar to what the representative from OECR highlighted, one of the amendments included, in the event the PAB is not established by July 1st, 2022, that OECR should be available to handle those complaints, to forward those to the law enforcement agency. Outside of that, we do approve and support this bill.
Thank you for jumping right in on that, because that was actually asked multiple times. Like, people are like, what's going to happen if it's not done by then? So thank you for that. Any questions of the Law Department? Nope. Okay. Next up, BPD.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Mr. Councilman Conway. For the record, my name is Michelle Wurzberger, and I am the Director of Government Affairs for the Baltimore Police Department. I'm joined here this evening with a couple of members of our team, Deputy Commissioner Brian Nadeau and Major Jason Callahan, both of whom work within the Public Integrity Bureau. They are here to answer any questions that you may have about what the process is currently. But other than that, we stand by our report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. Next up, Housing Authority of Baltimore City.
Good evening, Nina Semlis, Deputy Director of the Office of Government Relations. We don't have a representative from the Housing Authority here this evening, but they stand by their report. They no longer have a police force, so they would be amended out of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Sheriff's Office.
Good evening. My name is Captain Kim from the Baltimore City Sheriff's Office. We have no issues with this bill. We will comply with it when it's passed.
So, do you guys have a report? Because I see every report here except for the Sheriff's Office.
I'm sorry, I was not aware of this meeting until this evening.
Gotcha.
So I'll have the report next time.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, because the bill, was it referred to the Sheriff's Office? Do we know? Okay, let me just double check. Hold on one second. It was? Yeah, okay, I mean, the bill was referred to you guys, so we
I
definitely.
wasn't aware of that.
Okay, I understand. I'm saying, so whoever handles that for the sheriff's office needs to get the bill report in as soon as possible. We're gonna have another 2 hearings on this, but we do need an in-writing response from the sheriff's office. Okay, thank
Gotcha.
you. Any questions from the sheriff's office? No. Okay, thank you. All right, can we get the public testimony? All right, so as I stated in the beginning, anybody who would like to testify, you can sign in on the sheet on the back shelf. So far, we have 4 people signed in, and so we will go in that order. But if you'd like to testify, please go ahead and do that. The first up we have is Lydia Walter Rodriguez.
Good evening, council members. My name is Lydia Walter Rodriguez, and I'm the region director with CASA here in Baltimore, co-convener for the Campaign for Justice, Safety, and Jobs, and part of the statewide steering committee of MCJPA. To date, the Baltimore-based CGSJ Coalition includes dozens of diverse community organizations representing thousands of Marylanders from Baltimore fighting for police accountability and reform. CGSJ works alongside the Maryland Coalition for Justice and Police Accountability, who is an alliance of over 100 organizations statewide who are seeking police accountability through legislative change. I am here today to uplift the letter that CGSJ and MCJPA sent today to the council, outlining several suggestive amendments to the PAB bill. As it currently is drafted, it is excluding community members most impacted by police brutality to join the board. In order to ensure the PAB has inclusive membership and representation, amendments must be added to the current requirement that is stating that legal residents or citizens are disqualified of those who have served time for prior convictions. Police officers are responsible for serving all residents in the community, regardless of their immigration status or previous encounters with the criminal justice system. These restrictions hinder rather than promote public safety. The PAB, which is meant to provide a form of institutional accountability to the public, should be truly representative of the public. Community coalitions also suggest amendments to ensure public access to the PAB's recommendations, that the PAB have independent legal counsel. Compensation for board members should be considered. The PAB chair should be elected solely by the PAB members itself, as is being suggested in other jurisdictions. The age requirement of 21 should be lowered to 18, if not 16. Language related to administrative charging committee should be removed. And no former police officer or family members of the police officers should have a seat in the PAB. We are counting on our city council to prevent the weakening of police oversight and accountability. Please pass amendments to the PAB which address community concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a clarifying thing, because I missed in the beginning. You said something about a dozen what? I missed that.
CGSJ and MCJPA are more than a dozen organizations here in Baltimore City representing thousands of Baltimore City residents.
Gotcha, okay. So, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you had said. So I have your email here and forwarded to Richard, so it'll be added to the bill file.
Excuse me?
It will be added to the bill file. I just pulled up your email.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up, Crisali de Los Santos.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Crisalis de los Santos. I'm a community organizer with CASA, and I'm also a former Baltimore City Public School employee. CASA is the largest member-led immigrant advocacy and direct service organization in the state of Maryland and in the Mid-Atlantic region, with our majority of members being brown, immigrants, and working class members. I am here today to uplift the voices of so many Baltimore City members as with the city given such short notice of this hearing. Community engagement today was limited. We appreciate the ability for public testimony moving forward on the hearing on May 25th and June 8th, where you will be hearing more directly from our members. I want to raise 2 major concerns that I have in my testimony today regarding membership criteria for the PAB, it's extremely important that the immigrant member community have the ability to apply for a seat at the PAB. The class for citizenship or LPR status must be amended for the bill. Police officers are in charge of protecting all Baltimore City members, and that includes the immigrant community. So we should be able to apply for a seat at the table. In addition, the bill age requirement should be amended. Baltimore City youth have a lot to offer, and I can testify that myself. You've seen me here many, many times, so I think that Baltimore City youth should be given the opportunity, especially when it comes to Baltimore City public schools. They are the best witnesses and the best people to represent their peers. So I highly think that the age should be lowered to 18 or even 16, possibly. I have witnessed and heard countless community members, and I've seen it firsthand when police commit misconduct, and especially when it comes to youth and the immigrant community, they're not really upfront about making their concerns be heard. So having someone in the PAB that can actually represent them will make them feel more comfortable about showing up and making those accusations as needed. I love Baltimore City. I am a child of Baltimore City, so I would really love for you guys to think about this recommendation because I think that it could make a huge difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, Davon Love.
All right. Greetings, Chair, Council. My name is Davon Love, Director of Public Policy, Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. And as you heard, work in collaboration with both the city and statewide coalitions on police accountability. I appreciate the fact that the council has laid out several meetings to delve into the particulars of the amendments so we can discuss them in detail. What I want to do today is talk about the advocacy on HB 670, the Police Accountability Act of 2021, and how it applies to the particular legislation before us today. So just to provide some context, the perspective that the coalition worked from in its advocacy on the issue of police accountability is that what is paramount is community oversight, the ability for an external community-controlled entity to have the ability to engage in investigation and discipline of law enforcement. That's important because when we talk about community oversight, we're talking about addressing the challenge of police policing themselves and the community having a mechanism, an instrument of engaging in oversight in a way the community has confidence and faith in. And so what ended up passing in terms of HB 670 doesn't quite reflect the North Star that the coalition established throughout our advocacy in Annapolis on the issue. And the police accountability boards, particularly the requirement for each jurisdiction to pass a piece of legislation to establish the way in which the police accountability boards are structured, was in some ways a concession from the leadership to our coalition. But because the police accountability boards don't have investigatory power and don't have disciplinary power, it falls insufficient of what is our North Star. So in many respects, the amendments that we're offering are attempts to really salvage what we think are some of the flaws in what passed on the state level. So with that in mind, there are a few things in terms of this particular piece of legislation that I want to highlight. One of the key elements of it is that it codifies the structure of the charging committee. If you read HB 670, it doesn't contemplate an infrastructure, nor does it require it to be codified. That's important for two reasons. One more of a procedural, the other of principle. Procedurally, the challenge is that the way that other jurisdictions are handling their charging committees, and in fact, many police departments already have charging committees that are structured informally that live within the police department. And with the high volume of complaints and the high volume of disciplinary activities that are going to come across their desk, we just imagine that the capacity needed may exceed that of what the Office of Civil Rights and Equity has available. And so we don't want to codify something that then we may find just logistically may not work. So that's the procedural reason. I also just want to clarify when we talk about community oversight, and the reason that I started with that is because the charging committee being housed in the Office of Civil Rights, as the bill contemplates, does not satisfy the coalition's perspective on community oversight because ultimately the instrument of, or the leadership of the institution, the container from which it would live, still is an appendage of the administration. Whereas what we contemplated was a police accountability board that, given the amendments that we have submitted, would disperse power more in the hands where the community would have a say and how that entity is operated. So I just wanted to make that key distinction because this is a fight that we had, this past session and the session before, where the administration claimed that that putting the charge committee in the Office of Civil Rights satisfied community oversight, and I just wanted to say on the record that it does not, and provide that rationale to you all. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, Yanette Emanuel.
Good evening. My name is Yanette Emanuel, Public Policy Director with the ACLU of Maryland. As you just heard, this past legislative session, Baltimore City had an opportunity to finally empower the Baltimore Civilian Review Board by passing legislation that added powers granted to police accountability boards by the Maryland Police Accountability Act of 2021 to the existing CRB. This was an important bill because the reality is that when HB 670 was written, as Davon just explained, existing oversight entities like the CRB here in the city and the Community Complaint Oversight Panel in Prince George's County were not contemplated. Furthermore, it would have guaranteed that the CRB maintained critical independent investigatory and subpoena powers, but unfortunately that bill, as you just heard, did not pass due to opposition from the mayor's office. Now Baltimore must duplicate efforts to establish a police accountability board and an administrative charging committee by July 1st deadline. And we want to ensure that this rush process is not used as an excuse to disregard the critical amendments to strengthen the board before you. So while we have a few amendments we would like to see in the bill, I will focus my remarks specifically on membership, which next independent investigatory powers and funding is a critical aspect of any community oversight board. In terms of membership criteria, the emphasis should be on requiring members to be able to demonstrate through professional or lived experience the ability to balance effective oversight, perform objective analysis of an investigation report, and practice procedural fairness. We take particular issue with the requirements that the PAB members are legal residents or citizens, and the disqualification of those who have served time for prior convictions. Police officers, as you all know in this city, are responsible for serving all residents in the community, regardless of their immigration status or previous encounters with the criminal legal system. Additionally, we know that officers in the city have racially profiled, harassed, and wrongfully accused many Black and people of color in this city, and this restriction would exclude those individuals who have been the closest to the pain from serving on the board. Furthermore, these restrictions hinder rather than promote public safety, as Lydia mentioned, and the PAB, which is meant to provide a form of institutional accountability to the public, should truly be representative of the public. It's antithetical to the principle of community oversight to allow former law enforcement officers and family members of law enforcement officers to serve on the PAB. They already have a place in the process all throughout the process, and this is supposed to be specifically for community oversight. And this is something that we've currently seen in other police accountability boards throughout the state, is an attempt to put former law enforcement officers on there. Lastly, in order to ensure geographical diversity throughout the city, we recommend that each council person be able to recommend at least one individual to serve on the board, and that the board itself select their own vice chair and chair. Other amendments that we mentioned are also critical and are reflected in our written testimony, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Danielle Brown. Do I? Danielle Brown? Nope. All right, next up, Tiara Swilling? Nope. All right, that concludes the list of people who've signed in. Is there anybody else who would like to testify before we adjourn? And consider this open mic night, so if you want to speak, feel free to walk up to the mic. Seeing none. What's that? We weren't going to, but if you... Sure, go ahead. Mr. Love, would you like to take a question from Councilwoman Ramos?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate your testimony, and thanks everybody for being here. You had mentioned that you weren't excited about the idea of having the charging board and also the PAB living in the Office Can you let us know where you would recommend that?
So our perspective on it is that it doesn't satisfy our call for community oversight. So that's the first piece. In terms of where it should live, I think administratively it may be more sound to live within the police department itself. I just think the volume of complaints, all of the infrastructure that'll need to be built in order for the charging committee to do its duties, it may be more sound for it to live in the police department. I think it's worth it to try it in the Office of Civil Rights. I mean, I think if that's what the administration wants to do, I don't have an objection to it living in the Office of Civil Rights. I'm concerned about the administrative capacity of it to carry out the duties that, it's going to be required to live up to.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, that's a real
Okay, no problem. You have something else you'd like to say?
No, I thought you were about to ask me another question.
Oh, no. No questions. Anybody else? Seeing none, thank you all for joining us this evening. The next hearing is next Wednesday. Today's Wednesday.
Yep.
Wednesday the 25th at 1 p.m. And then we'll be holding one more hearing, at least one more hearing after that. And so thank you all for joining us. Good evening. We are now adjourned.